What's up? What's up? What's up, y'all? Joey Womack, founder, CEO of Goodie Nation, coming to you for another amazing marathon live stream on Giving Tuesday, y'all. On Giving Tuesday. Since 2020, we've been doing these marathon um, live streaming sessions. It started during the pandemic with a challenge of how long we could go talking about Goodie Nation, our impact, and stuff like that. And so now it's turned into a tradition. This year, you're in for a treat because we're talking about the history of Goodie Nation. On March 1st of next year, we'll turn 10 years old. And so this podcast, this live stream is really an interview between Casey Willis and myself. And I'll connect her, in a second. I'll bring her up in a second. And we're going to be talking about the full history of Goodie Nation, from like even my journey as a founder through the origins of Goodie Nation as a Facebook group through our various eras along the way. But because this is Gift for Giving Tuesday, this is really all about raising money. So we highly encourage you all, though it's not required, it will be super helpful to donate to us as we are building the next era of Goodie Nation. And you can do so by going to by texting Goodie 10 to 70 70 70. Texting Goodie 10 to 70 70 70. Any contribution helps as we're building the next era of Goodie Nation, but also a few other things, right? We're building an archive of our impact stories over the last 10 years. And so if we've impacted you in any way, shape, or form, large or small, right? Maybe you've been inspired all the way through. Maybe we make some introductions for you. Please go to our website and then click on 10 to submit an impact story. Again, we're building this huge library of people and stories that we have kind of helped along the way, right? So that's that. And then finally, kind of be on the lookout for more information about our activities over the next few months as we build up to our 10-year anniversary. So without further ado, I'll bring up Casey Willis from our team for introduction, and we'll hop right into it.
Hello. Hey, everybody. So yes, I'm Casey. I am a 2023 Goodie Nation Storytelling Fellow. Kind of hard to believe that the year is ending, but I have been here all year, and it's been amazing getting to know the team, getting to know the Goodie mission. And today, being Giving Tuesday, yes, it's like special, and you should totally give donations. But the fact that today is about reflecting about the past, reflecting about the journey, makes this Tuesday even more special. So very happy to be here, Joey.
Awesome. Let's get right into it. What you got for me?
No. It sounds good. I mean, this year has been tremendous. As I said, you were getting awards, secret awards from the mayor of Atlanta. You are apparently on the digital billboard in the airport now as one of the tech leaders of the city. Like, this is major. And so, I mean, to start with, let's go back. Let's go all the way back. Let's do our sort of prequel origin stories vibe. For those of y'all who know, that's another podcast that we do. I mean, tell the people who don't know, and in some ways I don't know the full story. How did you become the Joey that you are now? What is your origin story?
Yeah. I mean, I can go all the way back to before I was born, but I'm not going to start there for purposes of this. I do think, however, because we mainly worked with people that create things, whether they be entrepreneurs or leaders in the innovation space, I can talk about my journey as a startup founder, right? I'll skip over the first part, what I think is actually pretty interesting. It involves like rapper D Nice and stuff like that. But I'll talk about my time at Florida A&M University, where I launched my first startup. So this is the spring of 2000, or technically my second startup. This is the fall, of 2002. It was basically built on events, and it was built as so I'm gonna have a problem with my contact, so I may have to go do this several times. But it's called Digital Guest List, right? So it was like an event, or like an early Eventbrite. Bottom line is, I graduated in spring 2003. I kept on doing it full time. I really built it top 5 in that particular space, but in the process of building it top 5 in the space, We went from what we called back then 20 some odd years ago, internet companies, to a true tech startup, like a software based company, was around 07 and 08. Right. And so this is in the process of, like, during this process, I really started to build more technology. This is where I met Dre Barnes and Justin Dawkins, now of Collab Capital. Look to raise a little bit of money from family and friends. And in the process of trying to raise money, learning about what it took to raise money and building software products, I ran across things like customer discovery and customer development, and Steve Blank and Eric Reed's Lead Startup. And I thought, like, you know what? This information is awesome. It's readily available on the internet by blogs and some parts of Twitter and stuff like that. And I thought that more of my friends who were entrepreneurs, both technology and non-technology, should know about these philosophies and these methodologies in the startup space. Right. And so what happened, I would read an article, and then I would send out an email, actually, to my mentor, Terrell Whitley, one of my mentors, Terrell Whitley. And then I would add one or two people. Ultimately, that group, that the email list grew up to about 30 folks. In October of, I think it was 2009, I believe, or 2020, one of those years, Facebook groups were launched. And so I was like, you know what, this is a better way to actually distribute the information than me sending out emails every single time. So I launched a Facebook group, and ultimately it was called SF35. It was really dedicated. I would love to get into that story, but the whole thing was to build community to make it easier to distribute information around building successful businesses using tech startup methodologies.
Well, I want to get to that SF35, but even before then, so you're talking about, as you were building your startup, you were learning about customer discovery and all the things that go into building a business, building a brand. Are these things that you were just sort of learning about as you were going along? Did you have like a formal way that you learned all this stuff? Just out of curiosity.
I mean, I'm a voracious reader, right? I'm a voracious reader. Like, I mainly grew up an only child. And so a lot of my time, my formative years up until 12 years old, when I got step siblings, I spent time by myself, and I had to learn how to self-educate. Right. And so I just stumbled across some of like Steve Blank and Eric Rees, and I just like dove in, because my mindset is I want to get better. Right. Whatever it takes to kind of achieve this mission. If I got to, teach myself, I got to teach myself, which goes a little bit to the relationship gap that we have right now at Goodie Nation. Like, I know tons of people. I knew tons of entrepreneurs. What I did not know, however, were entrepreneurs in the tech startup space who could teach me these things. And so again, this is what we do now is, like, I experienced this problem, 10, 15, 20 years ago myself. And my way of solving it was just self-education, right? I stumbled across articles. I read it, like, oh, you know what? I think others should learn about this. Let me send it to them too.
Yeah, you kind of hit the nail on the head there, because I was thinking, like, you're talking about 10, 15 years ago. Even today, there's so many people who, like, these concepts are brand new, customer discovery and figuring out how to build brands. And so, okay, jumping back to the past, this SF35. So you're learning stuff. You're like, oh, snap, other people should learn this too. Going to start this group, going to start disseminating this information, SF35. What's that all about?
Okay, so SF35, and there's a whole logo behind it and everything, but here is the story. I'm watching Steve Blank talk at, so Eric Rees, one of his proteges and the creator of Lean Startup, had a conference called the Lean Startup Conference, I believe. And Steve Blank was the keynote speaker at it. Now, I didn't watch it live. I watched it maybe a month later on YouTube. And I'm watching this keynote, which is maybe 45 or so minutes long. And I think the title of the keynote was "Why Accountants Shouldn't Run Startups." Now, this interested me because actually, before I started my company in college, I was an accounting major. Like, actually, my original goal was to be an accountant, was to be a CPA. I did 4 internships in accounting. The fourth one was actually while I was building the first startup. But I did 4 internships in accounting, 3 before I even started starting a company. My goal was to be an accountant. So when he says, like, why accountants shouldn't, lead startups, this intrigued me. And so I'm watching the video in the speech, and Steve Blank starts talking about this story of the original founder of, and his name is Billy Durant of Chrysler and GM. And apparently he's like, does anybody actually know has anybody actually ever heard of Billy Durant? And people know, it's like, no. Like, again, he's the founder of GM. Bottom line is he starts GM, he builds it up one of the top two car manufacturers in the world with Ford. He then, it's because he's a true founder, very innovative. He builds it up, and then eventually he gets fired by his board. Right? He then starts like Chrysler or something like that, builds that up, buys GM back. I think that's the story. Maybe it's the other way around, but buys it back, fires the board, builds it up again, and then gets fired again. Right? And then, like, I believe Kettering takes over, and he's the dude that's known for like Sloan Kettering Institute. Like, he's the dude that's known as the main CEO that built up GM and stuff like that. I believe those are the companies in the names, right? And so the moral of this story is everyone knows Kettering. No one knows the founder of GM and Chrysler, right? And so he's like, the difference is this. I mean, I'm paraphrasing super against a 45-minute speech. The difference is this. The people who start companies have a much different skill set than the people who actually lead large organizations. And in many cases, the people who start companies cannot lead large organizations because the skills and more importantly, their mindsets are way too different. I mean, you see this now, like many startup CEOs don't make it as the IPO. The people like Mark Zuckerberg's of the world and Jeff Bezos, like, they're like rare. Like most founders don't make it, what he says, this is his word, to the promised land, right? Of leading a large, or of seeing their dream, their baby grow up and leading it there. They just don't make it to the promised land. And so what Steve Blank says is we need a school of entrepreneurship. He says it should be called the Billy Durant School of Entrepreneurship. I'm like, oh, it's an amazing idea, right? Now, again, this is around, this is early in the day. So this is maybe like 2009 or so, 2010. The early days also of accelerators, right? Which is essentially what accelerators essentially are, educational models, right? With investment and stuff like that around entrepreneurship, around tech startup entrepreneurship. He says we need the Billy Durant School of Entrepreneurship to teach what it takes for someone to build a company from 0 to 1, right? Not when it's like at 3 or 4, from 0 to 1. I'm like, oh yes, this is amazing. Because again, I've been an entrepreneur for several years. Like, oh yes, this is what I'm thinking. But then I'm thinking like, you know what? I got this group of entrepreneurs. And again, I went to FAMU, a black college. So I'm like, you know what? We need a black Billy Durant School of Entrepreneurship. And so the only black person that was famous with the last name Durant that I could think of was Kevin Durant. Now the Phoenix Suns, the all-star basketball player, future Hall of Famer, ironically startup investor. And so I'm like, well, I can't call this group the Kevin Durant School of Entrepreneurship because he would sue me into oblivion. So I began to think about the early days of video games, particularly around sports. And so back in the day, when you had like NBA Jam and a few others, and they wanted to use a popular sports player like Michael Jordan or Charles Barkley, they would have what looks like the player, but instead of their name, they would have their position and their number. So Michael Jordan would be SG23. Like that was his name. It didn't say Michael Jordan, it said SG23. And so I'm like, all right, we'll do this. And Kevin Durant was a small forward and his number was 35. So we called it SF35. Again, essentially the Kevin Durant, the Black Billy Durant School of Entrepreneurship.
So one of the things that I've enjoyed most about getting to know founders and startup leaders this year, and in particular their origin stories, myself, I come from arts background, creative background, and there are so many origin stories that it's like the beginning does not seem at all like it's going to connect to how it ended up, or what it ended up becoming. In no way, shape, or form. When I saw SF35, I'm like, oh, it's probably just like an acronym. And it was 35 people in the group. That I did not see that coming at all. And I think that's just like a testament to like the creative mind in general, whether that's in art, whether that's in business, just making these connections between things and like birthing something into the world is so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and you think about it, right? I mean, it was a school of entrepreneurship, and that's essentially what we do now at Goodie Nation, right? It's an educational model. We just do things a little bit differently, traditional education. And here's the ironic thing too, like, especially on my mom's side, full of educators. My grandmother, her mother was an elementary school teacher in Montgomery, Alabama. My mom and her two sisters work in higher education in black colleges in the state of Alabama. On my dad's side, one of my aunts was a middle school teacher. Another worked at the same actually black college in Mobile, Alabama, community college that my mom worked at. And so, education has been, strong throughout my family, and a few other family members as well have been in the education space. So education has always been strong. And so, I do think of myself as an educator, just not the official title. My cousin on my mom's side, basically my older brother, he's an elementary school teacher here in Atlanta. Right. And so, I teach, I run a school, quote unquote. It's a different type of school, but it's a school nonetheless.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think the whole motto of education is completely being reimagined. So yes, you're an educator. You're definitely an educator. So okay, SF35 Facebook groups. I mean, anyone who remembers the heyday of Facebook pre-Meta knows that like groups were like a big deal. And so I'm curious, like what was the vibe in SF35? Who were the people who were finding this group? What were some of the activities that were going on?
I mean, you have people in that group like, Julbert Solomon was eventually in it. Felicia Hatcher, now the CEO of Black Ambition. Natalie Cofield, the founder of Walker's Legacy. I mean, it grew to 300 people. And so some of the people who are leaders in the startup space now, we were youngins back then. We were just getting in the game, and there wasn't a ton of communities online for us to gather and stuff like that. I'm not saying that we were the only one by far, but I'm saying there wasn't a lot of communities for people of color in tech, and particularly people of color in tech, in startup tech, right? And so it was a way for us to kind of talk. People might share their activities. They might share different articles they were reading, because again, I believe that information and education is the key. And so people could share stuff that they're reading and opportunities that they came across. Maybe there's a pitch competition. Maybe there's, a program or something to that effect. All those things make a difference. And actually, it wasn't that group, but another Facebook group I was put in, well, I'm sure we'll get to this later, did lead to essentially, my life's goal, and eventually of helping 1 billion people, and eventually the Goodie starting. So I'm sure we'll get into that shortly.
Oh yes, no, that's amazing. So did you know any of the people that were in the Facebook group before you all formed an online community, or were these people?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, here's the thing, like, because of my background, again, so my mom is like a human LinkedIn. I get that from her. So and because of my event background from the original startup, from Digital Guest List, I was already at my max of 5,000 Facebook friends. Right. I don't know if anybody knew. I mean, back then, I was probably saying way before they kind of have the page and stuff, the maximum was 5,000 friends. So I was at my max. And so, the reason I spun up that group pretty quickly is because I had, 30, 40, 50 people that I could all automatically kind of add to the group. And then it just kind of grew organically. People would invite their folks and stuff like that. And then it kind of just grew from there.
Wow. So this is like a history of Goodie, a history of social media in a way. But I mean, it just goes to show like community can be formed wherever people are intentionally trying to form community. It can be in person, it could be online, it could be wherever. But I would like to know, okay, so you have this group, it's growing to 300 people. I'm sure at some point somebody was like, y'all, we have to link in person. We have to do something in person. Or maybe it was you who was like, okay, it's time to move this community IRL in some way. So what was like the first in-person thing that you decided to do?
Well, we would do a few things, right? For example, there were times when the Black Enterprise Entrepreneur Conference would come to Atlanta, and then we might do an informal, super informal meetup. Like when I say super informal, it may be like 8 to 10 people there, right? Who's going to the Black Enterprise Entrepreneurship Conference? Okay, people raise their hand. Let's just kind of meet there and stuff like that. And kind of stuff like that might happen on and off. But the big thing for me was really around mental health for entrepreneurship. So during this time, the parallel time I had this Facebook group and running my startup digital guest list, I actually did a third project, which was I would help out bring young alumni of FAMU into the fold to get them to donate to the university. Because I'm sure you're familiar. You heard that HBCUs have a huge problem with getting younger alumni to donate, right? And engage with alumni associations and stuff like that. So I started this thing called the Young Alumni Movement. And bottom line is, long story short, instead of, and I would, during like homecomings and like classics for FAMU, like I was the dude throwing all the parties for FAMU. I had a partner in Crown Royal, and we would have these open bar celebrity DJ events and stuff like that, right? Atlanta Classic, Homecoming, Florida Classic in Orlando and stuff like that. And so I thought, and what I would witness with my own two eyes was that young people, 35 and under, graduates of FAMU, have good, well-paying jobs, they would pay, in Atlanta, I witnessed this, if people remember the old Compound nightclub. I literally witnessed one of my friends pay $100 to skip the line, not to get into the club, pay $100 to skip the line, then paid another $75 to get inside the club, not VIP, right? But would not give $100 to FAMU. And I saw this over and over and over again. And I'm like, you know what? What if we did a dope event, and instead of charging people admission, we just asked that they actually just donate to the university? Right? I could get it sponsored by Crown Royal and have a good DJ and things like that. So we did one here in Atlanta. It was at an old, not old, but it was at a car, one of those places that restores cars, sells them at high end and stuff like that. And so I instead of putting $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 in my pocket from the admission to the party, I said, like, yo, just contribute to FAMU, and that's your admission price. Just donate to the local alumni association, and you're good. Knowing that I also would get a sponsorship check from these brands. It's not, I give up $20,000 or so dollars, but it's for the greater good. Because I got this check coming in that will at least, help me out. But that check didn't come in for like 8 months. From a large company. I pressed on, hey, I need this money. And so I'm running out of money. And so January 2011 comes, and then I'm having this crisis. I'm like, I want to make the world a better place, but in the process of me doing so, I'm going broke, straight up. And so I'm like, you know what? I need to talk to another entrepreneur who's going through something similar. And I just want to vent to somebody else. So I go to like the Facebook group, and nobody in Atlanta could meet me. I then text some friends. First I actually went to family and friends, and they were like, you know what? Oh, we'll get to you later. I'm not available right now. I'm like, this is crazy. I text like 30 people, and nobody is available to talk to me right now. So then I go to the Facebook group. I'm like, you know what? I will buy everyone a round of drinks if y'all come to the W Hotel in downtown Atlanta and listen to me vent about this issue. And 2 people showed up. 2 people showed up, which made my tab super small, right? But we sat there and we talked for like 2 hours, and I actually felt better for like a whole 3 months. Right? Like I was having a true crisis around this stuff, and I felt better for 3 months. So fast forward a year, and I'm driving back from Christmas in Alabama to Atlanta. I get a call from Amber Saunders. She's now a lawyer here in Atlanta. At the time, I think she was running like 100 Black entrepreneurs, something like that. And she forced me. I had been telling her about this concept around getting entrepreneurs together at an event, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, you know what? I've already booked a room at Peter Thomas's old restaurant on Memorial, and you're doing this event. And if it not for Amber forcing me to do that, I probably wouldn't have done it. I promise. I promise. She's like, it's gonna be a few weeks from now in January. Like, you're doing this thing. And we had the event. There were about 20 entrepreneurs in that room where you were drinking and eating, and we were venting. I mean, people got raw. People got raw about their struggles around being an entrepreneur. And that's when you start to see the magic happen in person.
And so the event, was this sort of like the ground floor of what later would become All Founders Need Therapy, one of the signature Goodie Nation programs? Is this bit session like oh wow, we should start talking about mental health as founders?
Yeah, that was it. And it was also ground zero for community, because you saw people coming together. And actually after we ended it, because eventually we had to leave the restaurant, we actually went down the street to this is not Marlowe's. It's something. It's right down Memorial, and we continued with drinks and stuff. And that was real when true community started to build amongst people, in that Facebook group.
Yeah, it's almost like at that time, this is like what, 2012, 2013, almost like a really revolutionary thought about publicly speaking about mental health struggles. I feel like that sort of movement was just starting to bud just in general society. So to kind of see that this was a necessity specifically for the founder community is like there's a lot of really keen insight there. So yeah, we'll talk more about All Founders Need Therapy a little bit later and what that has evolved into. But okay, so following the breadcrumbs, connecting the dots. Okay, so Facebook group SF35. We have an in-person event, which later became All Founders Need Therapy. Okay, so then what happens? You're gaining traction. In online spaces and in-person spaces. What is the next sort of like thought bubble?
So if that All Founders Need Therapy was 2012, and again, sometimes these dates are a little bit weird to me. So fast forward a few weeks, I still have the startup digital guest list. All-Star Weekend is happening in Orlando, Florida, again, where we're already doing events that have a pretty big presence. And so I go to All-Star Week. I go down to All-Star Weekend like 10 days in advance to actually work with one of our largest customers. So I go down there. I'm actually staying in the hotel, the same hotel the ball players eventually stay in, like a new Hilton. And so I'm just down there, and we ended up, helping to run campaigns for the largest person doing events for that for the All-Star Weekend. They still had some like 26 events, and we were doing one of them. We actually had the third largest party during that All-Star Weekend, with basically no marketing except for the promotion from our product itself. Like no radio, no flyers, just straight digital marketing using our product. Beautiful thing to witness, right? We beat out celebrities. People had no idea how we were doing it. And so we were at the top, the peak of the startup. Now I drove down to Orlando, and on the drive back from Orlando to Atlanta, we were at the peak. I began to think like, you know what? This ain't it. This ain't it. Like the future is me not doing, this startup where for parties and basically another form of Eventbrite and stuff like that. This ain't it. There's something around, this SF35 group and helping out diverse founders. And I don't know what it is, but I got to figure it out. Right. And so, the rest of 2012 is in the back of my mind. And I came back to Atlanta, kept on doing stuff. And by the end of 2012, I'm like, you know what? I got to lead this startup. And I got to figure out a business model to support diverse founders. I don't know what it's going to be, but I got to figure it out. And so, January 1st, 2013, I sent an email out to our users and followers like, hey, I'm leaving this journey. I gotta figure out a way to make diverse founders better. I'm going on this. We talk about the hero's journey at Goodie Nation. I'm sure we'll get into that in a second. But, this was my wilderness moment, and so wandering in the wilderness to kind of try to find the way. And one of the first things I did was go to South by Southwest because I had never been around national tech events, outside of Atlanta. Outside of Atlanta. So I went to South by Southwest in 2013, was absolutely blown away. The next thing, well, I've never been to Silicon Valley and San Francisco, the Bay Area. So I got to go out there. Went out there to visit Justin Dawkins, who's now at Collab Capital, stayed a week. And then eventually I went back out there in October. And when I was out there, I got put into another Facebook group called Building While Black and Brown West. So basically a group of Black and Brown founders on the West Coast. Well, I think most people were actually out in San Francisco or the Bay Area. And so in that Facebook group, because I was there visiting, in that Facebook group, somebody else posted about a program to support social entrepreneurs who want to make the world a better place. There's a new program called Hive, and the applications were closing like the next day. And I applied for that program. I'll stop here. I applied for that program with this idea around SF35. And then the next day, I get a call from one of my mentors, named is Sanjay Parak, here in Atlanta. At the time, Sanjay was running a thing called Refresh South. Now, Refresh South was basically Atlanta's startup week. He did it at 2013. He was planning for the 2014 version of it. And so he calls me again. I'm out in San Francisco. He calls me. He's like, Joey, I need you to do some events to diversify the 2014 startup week. I'm like, cool. I'll figure something out. This is the middle of October 2013. November comes, no idea. I had already applied to the Hive program, right? December comes, and I remember because I went back home for my mom's birthday. On the day before her birthday, I come up with this idea called Goodie Hack, a hackathon to help local nonprofits solve some of their internal challenges using technology. And the thing is, we would take developers, we would find diverse or developers in general, pair them up with 10 nonprofits for a one-day hackathon, and we would make these nonprofits better. They could then help more people. The next day, and I'll stop here, the next day, I get accepted into this Hive Global Leader Program, which was happening a few weeks from then, so MLK weekend, on the premise that I was going to do this SF35 group. So December 13th, I come up with the idea for Goodie Hack. December 14th, I get accepted into the Hive program based on SF35, and a few weeks later is when I start the Hive program.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So many questions. So before we get into Goodie Hack and what happened with Hive, let's go back to the fact that you, at the top of your game as a founder, decided to just sort of walk away from that part of your journey. I think another parallel that I've noticed between a lot of startup founders and a lot of artists and creatives is like, yes, we care deeply about our work and our missions, and we want to show our ideas and change the world. But there tends to also be this little also, I want the recognition for it. I want to have the biggest party. I want to have the award. I want to have the notoriety. And so it sounds like you were getting that with your product, with your company. And I'm curious, was that hard for you to walk away from at all? Or how did that affect your decisions?
Nah, it was hard, but actually what was much more difficult was telling the team, the people that had sacrificed for years for me and for they were kind of living out their dreams through the startup as well, right? And tell them, this ain't it, fellas. This ain't it. This is tough. I don't know what y'all gonna do from here on out, but in order to make the world a better place for people that look like us, I got to do this. I don't expect for y'all to understand. I don't understand it fully myself. I don't know how I'm gonna make this happen, but I got to figure it out. And so I mean, it pained me for years. Honestly, it pained me for years. Like to know that folks sacrificed for my vision. And then ultimately because I believed in something greater for the original startup, and then at the peak to walk away. That was the most difficult thing by far.
Yeah, no, it's like it's very cinematic, and I mean that in like a, that thing that just happens that you can't explain, but you have to follow it, and then it leads you to greater. Like it's a very common story that we hear with a lot of like leaders and founders. But I'm just always curious, like what is that like when you reach a certain level, and the level that is, I'll say, perceived to be what you should want, like what every founder wants. And then you're just like, actually, no.
Yeah. What it feels like in real life, to me at least, was, and people believe in various things, or maybe some people don't. But I've heard this from other older family, mom and family and grandmothers and all kind of stuff. But it felt like if you hear a knock on the door. It's very faint, right? And eventually over time, that knock gets louder. And eventually it got to the point when I decided to walk away, that knock was so loud, I couldn't hear anything going on in the house. Now the house is the original startup. And so I just had to open the door, right? I could not focus on, and had to walk out of that house because that knock had got so loud. Now what's happening is that knock is happening in your head, or at least to me it was. Right. And so, again, I heard from people over the years, like, God will keep on knocking on the door until you open it up. And so that was it. It got so loud, or said much differently, my thoughts, became like, say, 10% SF35 and 90% digital guest list, or, whatever. And then it got to the point that most of my thoughts were around SF35 and less were around digital guest list. So, and I just had to it became just too much. I had to walk out that door.
Wow. Yeah. Interesting. So, okay. We'll fast forward back to where we were. That's just, I mean, again, that's just like such a common thing that you hear with visionaries and creators and leaders about just like the voice or the thing or the, I could tell my purpose was elsewhere. So yeah. Wow. Okay. So you get into Hive with an idea that's based around SF35. You are asked to diversify programmings at like early version of Atlanta Startup Week. And you come up with the idea for Goodie Hack. So my first question with that is Goodie Hack. Like where does that name come from? Why the Goodie Hack? How did this whole goodie things start?
So it's a hackathon for good, right? It's a hackathon for good. And we're in Atlanta. I grew up, during the hip hop era and stuff like that, and paying homage to Atlanta, to hip hop, but also some of the content about which Goodie Mob talked about. I was like, hackathon for good is in Atlanta. We're focusing on diverse communities, or communities of color, particularly Black communities in Atlanta, through the nonprofits. Goodie, and then as a hackathon, Goodie Hack. And that's how the name kind of came about. We're not officially, associated with Goodie Mob. I ain't never met those dudes before in my life. I would love to.
I was gonna ask. I was like, do they know?
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it is a, I'll say this, as a, I'm not a super fan of the word. Not that I don't like. I'm a fan. But I do, understand some of the things that they were talking about, and in so many cases, I feel like of artists from the 80s, the 90s, and early 2000s, around stuff to improve communities and things of that nature. Like some of that stuff gets forgotten. Like a lot of those artists, whether they be, verbal artists or written artists or visual artists, a lot of that stuff gets forgotten. I think it's a shame, right? So that was my way of making sure people never forget, about, the Goodie Mob and the Goodie Mobs of the world and stuff like that. And so, that's how I came up with the name, and the rest is history.
Okay, so we have the name Goodie Hack. We have the origin story of the name Goodie Hack. Before we even dive into more about what the hackathons were about, I want to talk a little bit about how you started to brand some of these ideas. So you have Goodie Hack based on some of the principles from Goodie Mob. How did this sort of goodie vibe continue to grow and manifest?
Well, I mean, so a few things happened. One, the super first idea for Goodie Hack was developers and nonprofits. This is all happening in December 2013. I went home for Christmas, my mom's birthday. I came back to Atlanta, and I began to worry that I couldn't find enough developers to match the nonprofits. Because we had 10 nonprofits in a hackathon team, you may need like 5 or 6 people. I'm like, I don't even know if I know 60 developers, 50, 60. I mean, well, I need to know more than that to get 50 or 60. And so I'm talking to Nina Ukuku from Black Founders. Now I'm assuming she's still at Meta as a lawyer. And she's like, and the reason I'm talking to Nina is because she, along with Hadia, Monique Woodard, and a few others, Chris, I forgot, oh God, he's gonna kill me. Chris from Warner School. They ran Black Founders, the original group for Black founders across the country. And they would go around and they would do events. They would also do hackathons for college students. Now, they came to Atlanta in February of 2013, and I was a mentor at a hackathon. I had never in my life been to a hackathon for I'd never participated in one, but I was there to help people out with ideas, right? And so when it came time for us to do Goodie Hack, I called up Nina to get some advice and thoughts and things of that nature. And I'm like, I'm concerned that I can't find enough developers. She was like, you know what? You don't have to do a traditional hackathon with strictly developers. You can do an idea hackathon. And when she said this, and I remember exactly where I was entering, was getting on the 7585 from like University Avenue, Prior Street. Overcast day, late December, just before New Year's Eve, I think around December 29th or 30th. And it's like, I heard the sound from the heavens. Right? I heard the sound, and I was like, she says, idea hackathon, this opens it up to like other type of people than just strictly developers. I'm like, yo, this is it. Now we can bring in founders, marketers, designers, strategists, people from the community. We can build something truly special. It was only supposed to be a one-day hackathon, one time, one day, right? She says this, I hear the bells in the heavens. We got it. I start to put it out there in January after New Year's Day. We started to do the marketing around it. It immediately blew up. Like, I got calls from outside of Atlanta, from UNCF, Chad Womack. No, not well, maybe we're related. We don't know, but still, at the time, we didn't know each other that well. Got calls from UNCF. Got calls from a bunch of people from across the country. Like, yo, this is dope. Let us know how it goes. So even before the first event, I had an inkling that this thing is going to be dope, right? It got potential. And, we can go into Hive in a second, but that's how it became much more inclusive. And it was more than just developers and nonprofit. Developers and nonprofits.
Okay, yes, the plot is thickening to a great degree. So I think this might be a great time to just sort of reset the space a little bit. So for those of you just joining, for those of you who'll be watching this recording at some point later, this is our Goodie Nation Giving Tuesday reflections on 10 years of Goodie Nation's impact. I don't know, special, is that what we're calling it? I don't know, live stream, chatting it up and just having this amazing opportunity to pick founder and CEO Joey Womack's brain, learn about some of the just very nuanced, juicy tidbits about how Goodie Nation in its current form, in the form that's going to inform the future, even became to be, from the smallest of ideas, from the individual relationships that help spark new ideas, trying new things, thinking things were going to be one-time events, and they end up being cornerstones of the organization. Like this is I think the start of like some sort of, I don't know, you're writing a book at some point, or
maybe so.
This is like the notes, I don't know. And yeah, go ahead.
No, yeah, I was gonna say I want to go because on LinkedIn, Liberty White made an amazing recollection there. Going back a little bit, back to March 2013, that trip to South by Southwest. And this is an underrated story around, she labels it a defining moment for the Atlanta ecosystem. But I also want to share around around what happened and what it takes in intentional efforts, right? So the recap meeting happened inside the old Hippopotamus space in the Biltmore. Now, Hippopotamus is now the blog, tech blog based in Atlanta, covers the Southeast, but mainly like Atlanta startup community, right? Back then, it started out as a co-working space. And eventually, some brothers took it over, James Harris, Anthony G., and a few others. And so James Harris, who, if you know about this, the hero's journey arc, James is like the Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's the Yoda. He is the Mr. Miyagi of the group. Shout out to James. And so he organizes a trip for startup founders in Atlanta to go to South by Southwest via bus. So he rents like an actual, like Lil Wayne's actual tour bus, 2 showers on it, beds and stuff like that, right? He rents it, and then we're going to drive down to Austin. Startup founders only. And so, at the time, remember, I had walked away from my startup. So technically I wasn't a startup founder anymore, but he let me on that bus. And, so even there's a few things like, where are we going to park the bus during the day at South by Southwest? Now, again, the power of relationships and stuff. At the time, Natalie Cofield, again, founder of Walker's Legacy, used to be in Biden administration in small business. She was running the Austin's like Black Chamber of Commerce, and they had an office right across the highway from the downtown space where everything happened in South by Southwest. Natalie's in the group of SF35. So I call up Natalie like, yo, we got this bus. We coming from Atlanta. We need some place to park it. And she's like, cool, but can you make a donation to the Austin Black Chamber? So I mean, she's, she brought the money. I get it. So I'm like, how much you talking about? She's like $1,000. I'm like, shoot, I ain't got 1,000 like that. So what I do, I call my frat brothers from FAMU, like, yo, we taking this trip down to Atlanta. I need to raise a little bit of money. This is going to change. I got a feeling it's going to change the world, right? This is going to change the world. I had, I'm not saying I sold them a dream, but essentially it's what it did, right? Cat started donating left and right. We raised the money, shot it over to Natalie for a donation. We parked that bus there. And for me in particular, right? It was the most eye-opening experience I had ever seen around culture. So I don't know if it's the same way now. And I go to South by pretty much every year, but it's the first time or 10 years ago, that culture of giving first at South by was like apparent through and through. Nobody would ask you questions. Everyone was looking to help out. And that was a moment that I was like, you know what? We got to build this in more to Atlanta. And because people would like open up. If you want to talk to like the most prominent person in tech, they will make it happen. No questions asked. Right. I got into events that I think I would never thought I would never get into. I met folks I thought I would never meet, the people that you read about at TechCrunch and saw on Twitter. But that's how South by was. And so when I came back, and Liberty talks about this, as she mentioned this on LinkedIn, there's a recap meeting in that old Hippopotamus. And that's where we talked about all the things that happened for Atlanta folks at South by, right? Beautiful, beautiful moment. And again, kind of forever changed my life. But if James Harris doesn't organize it, it's not intentional about doing a bus trip, and also intentional about inviting people to participate, because it could have been Let's be real. In Atlanta, they probably could have filled that bus with no people of color. Let's be real. That the people on that bus was about 50% people of color and women. And he was intentional about doing that. And again, that forever kind of set the foundation for how I want to build community, especially around what ultimately turned into Goodie Nation.
I feel like I'm about to jump around the metaverse a little bit, and I have the marker, I have the pin in where we left off to jump back to, but you just sparked a whole nother line of questioning that I feel like I should have asked at the beginning. So we know you're from Alabama, went to FAMU, shout out to HBCU, Hampton U, what's up? How did you end up in Atlanta?
Yeah, so I graduated from FAMU in 2003. And I stayed in Tallahassee 2 years building the company, right? I can go into what happened there, stuff like that, how I had to sacrifice. But I stayed in Atlanta 2 years building the company. And we were growing. We had a defining moment. So I graduated in spring of 03. Defining moment for us was the 2004 All-Star Weekend in LA. Again, via introductions, basically we went nationwide. There's a whole story around that. I can get into another time, right? And then our market started to grow first in Chicago. I have a cousin who was in the industry, and so he led our efforts in Chicago, did an amazing job. And then my stepbrother lived in Atlanta, and then Atlanta was our second market outside of Tallahassee, Florida. And it was growing the fastest. It wasn't big as Chicago, but it was growing the fastest. And so I know I need to get out of Tallahassee to fulfill the potential. And Atlanta was, again, our fastest growing market for digital guest list, but it also was like Tallahassee North. Like everybody from FAMU moved to Atlanta at the time. I had family here, and it was just a no-brainer.
That's interesting because, okay, again, jumping around the metaverse here in the present. I mean, as a founder myself, I find Atlanta to be kind of to your point about what you saw at South by Southwest. Like if you ask, somebody is going to help you. It's been a very almost southernly hospitable place to figure out how a business works, right? But I feel like in what you're saying about the forefathers and the foremothers, there had to be some work in order to start building these communities and these relationships. And to your point, intentional work about building these pathways for, I guess, I'm a newbie too, for we newbies to just plug into a Goodie Nation, to plug into a We, to plug into a Rice or Atlanta Tech Village. And so my sort of secondary question about this incredible pilgrimage to South by Southwest that apparently happened. What do you think the importance of the sort of cross-pollination of Atlanta with other tech hubs around the country? How did that sort of help with the building up of the city as like an innovation capital of the country in a way?
Yeah, I mean, exposure is everything, right? Part of it is like it's super easy to be focused only on your own space. I don't care if it's your own family, your own city or neighborhood, city, whatever it is. When you get outside your comfort zone and see how other places are doing things, you can take a little bit of them and kind of bring it back here, right? So that's what happened. Like for me in particular, I saw South by, and I was like, I was on a high for about 2 months before like some of the stuff in Atlanta would get like back to me. So for example, you may go to an event, maybe outside of tech, and then people will like judge you based on what you did, right? Or what kind of car you drive. That's Atlanta, particularly like black folks. That is how it is, right? And so you don't have that, or that's not what I experienced at South by Southwest or San Francisco, the Bay Area, right? People would just, half the time they didn't even ask you, and then they're like, how can I help you out, right? Like, what do you need? Right? Like that type of give first, that type of altruistic mentality is what I always wanted to see in Atlanta. And I think that's what helps to build, for, an inclusive capital of the world. Like, again, we are in the South. We do have Southern hospitality, and there are bits and pieces of that culture in the city, but it wasn't as prevalent as in other parts of the country, or in certain pockets of the country, probably is a better way to put it. And so when you're exposed to those things, you can bring back the best pieces of those communities and then instill them within your community, in this case in Atlanta.
Yeah, very cool. Like I see for foreshadowing, that mentality of how can I help you being the sort of forefront of relationship building, definitely weaves its way within Goodie Nation in so many different ways. So that makes a lot of sense. Okay, move the timeline back. Okay, here's where the pin dropped in the sort of linear timeline of the history of Goodie Nation. So we left off. You had been accepted into Hive, the idea around SF35. Also, you're planning your first Goodie Hack. What's going on? What's going on in your life at this time?
Okay, so we go out to Hive. Hive, the program for social entrepreneurs, the first time they've ever had it, is at the change.org offices in San Francisco. 30 entrepreneurs. The founder of the company, Ryan Alice, has started another an email service company, almost like a MailChimp, and he had sold it. I think, I don't know, I had heard almost $100 million, and so this dude maybe 50 million, something like that. So regardless, a lot of money, and he was dedicated to giving back and developing people that will make the world a better place. And so the first day of the program, and there's people in the room like, a former person on the same swim team as Michael Phelps, somebody from Nepal, and her father was a high-ranking official in the government there, like cabinet level. She wanted to become the first woman prime minister of Nepal. We stayed for those that weren't from San Francisco, we stayed in a hotel. We had two roommates in a two-bedroom or two-bed hotel in the Holiday Inn, I think at Fisherman's Wharf. Like 3 of us stayed in the room. It was crazy. One dude worked for Google.org, funding projects all over the world. The other cat was from India and already worked in the government. He's like 28 years old, wanted to become the prime minister of India one day. Like legit world-changing ambitions these folks have. And so I'm living, near the old Braves Stadium, now the Georgia State one, in Atlanta, South Atlanta. And that Ryan, the founder, says, how can we impact change for 1 billion people? And I'm like, okay. I got this idea for like SF35 helping Black entrepreneurs. Most of them are in the Southeast. I'm doing the math, and like the math ain't mathing, right? The math thing. I'm like, I don't know. This is the first day. This is a 3-day program, with the third day being MLK Day, actually. I'm like, the math ain't mathing on this one. So I got to figure this thing out. And I took it as, how can individually each of us impact 1 billion people? And again, I'm doing the math ain't working out. But I knew I had this idea for Goodie Hack, and I'm like, okay, maybe Goodie Hack can do it. And over those next 3 days, I started coming up with a plan to use Goodie Hack to help 1 billion people by the year 2039. Like my life's goal and stuff like that. And so that's how I thought about kind of scaling, even though the first hackathon had never happened. The first hackathon wasn't going to happen for another 6 weeks. And I had never done a hackathon before in my life. I'm like, we got some early evidence it's going to be dope. We got to figure it out. And then we're going to start doing more. And that's how we're going to help 1 billion people.
Okay, so this may be like a little difficult question to answer, because again, going back to the parallels of just like creatives, founders, entrepreneurs, people with visions, a lot of us say like, oh my God, this thing that I'm about to do, it's going to change the world. It's going to be the best thing ever. It's going to be amazing. I have the idea for it. I just have the idea right now. But how do you even like within yourself, like back it up? Like, how do you justify within yourself, like have that confidence of like, no, and like, I mean it. This isn't just something I'm saying. This is actually going to reach 1 billion people.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a mindset thing. It's a pure mindset thing that I've hoped I've built into the culture of Goodie Nation. And, before the pandemic, when we did stuff in person, we have this Goodie Nation pledge, and we started to do it now through the summit. But it's a mindset. The first thing is I will do the impossible, right? And then the very next thing is I will then break the impossible down into manageable pieces, right? So in baked into those two things is actually a very underrated part is, okay, I'm gonna do the impossible, 1 billion people. The very next thought is, basically how can I make it happen? And then I'm gonna break it down to manageable pieces, right? It's not I'm gonna do the impossible, and you know what? It's impossible. Because at that point, you're negative. The very first thought you got to have is, how can I do this? And that takes a lot of discipline mentally, a lot of mental discipline to say, like, how can I do this? Even if you think this thing is truly impossible, how can I do it? And that's when you start to get creative. Start coming up with ideas. Let's break this thing down into manageable pieces, right? We go from 1 to 10, 10 to 100, 100 to 1,000, so on and so forth. Okay, well, how can I get my first one, right? And then you solely focus on getting your first one. You take a step. Once you take that step, you solely focus on going from 1 to 10. You don't think about 1 billion. You don't zoom out. You zoom in on the present and you focus on getting to that 10. Then once you hit that 10, okay, the next step is 100, for example. You don't look out to 1 billion. You don't look out to 1,000. You look out to 100. And then you take another step and then another. And then you look up and you've walked a bunch of steps and now you're at 1 billion, right? That's the mindset that I think you got to have in order to create like massive change. But it does take a lot of discipline because that's not human nature, right? You got to fight against human nature to actually achieve the impossible.
Let's dive into that just for a minute. Again, I got the pin in the timeline, but what you said about that's going against human nature, going against the impossible is against human nature. This sounds like a big, like huge, just ethereal concept, but for so many founders, for so many people who are, especially in this time, at this particular year, facing the impossible in so many ways. I mean, this is turning into a little bit of a masterclass, just a little mini masterclass within the history. But like, what does that mean to you? How is going against the impossible, going against human nature, something that you faced? And if you have any just little nugget of advice for the founders who are going against the impossible right now, how do they find that power within themselves or start to even find it?
I mean, you've probably been, the mindset is this: go out there and be a champion, right? Go out there and be a champion. And if you look back at your life, you've probably been a champion your entire life, right? Actually, if people truly look back at their life, they realize they've been doing what they're doing right now. They've been doing it since they were a little kid. You just don't realize it. Like for most people, especially in the US, that gets weaned out of you early on, right? And so when I talk to people about building purpose, there's a few things, right? One, kind of look at what your parents were like, if you know them and stuff like that, and look at their skills, right? Two, though, is the underrated part is if you can remember what you were like as a 4th, maybe 5th grader, especially in the U.S. educational system. Traditionally, U.S. education system is, generally speaking, elementary school, middle school, high school, right? You get to middle school around 6th grade, you're 12 years old, and, you are at the bottom of the social pyramid. So you're not only growing as a human, right? You're becoming more aware of yourself and impressing, but you're becoming more aware of yourself. And the societal pressures mean that you have to impress people. You typically want to impress older people. And so you start to like depress things within yourself, your true self, because maybe society does not reward those type of traits or behaviors. But when you're in elementary school, when you're in 4th and 5th grade, you typically are at the top of the social pyramid, right? And you don't have that same pressure until you're around a bunch of 13, 14-year-olds, right? If you're around a bunch of 6, 7, 8-year-olds, you're good because they look up to you. And so that's when I feel like human beings are typically free. Like back then, people might sit in their room and draw, or they would sing, or they would do whatever. Those type of activities you did at 4th and 5th grade is when you were great. It's when you were champions. You could just free to be yourself. And that's when, humans typically are at their best, right? But society typically will wean that out of you because it just doesn't reward a lot of those behaviors, right? And even if you do have the courage to be yourself and it's different than societal norms, society gets you out the way, right? They start to label you as certain things, and then you just withdraw. And so, the folks that can go back to being just who they are the folks that are usually more likely to do the impossible.
Wow. Incredible. Yes. Do the impossible today, somebody. Yes. Okay. Moving back to the linear storytelling timeline. Wow, that was great stuff. Great stuff. So you're on day 3 of the Hive Accelerator. You are determined now to use the forthcoming Goodie Hack as the vessel to start your journey to help 1 billion people. It hasn't happened yet, though. Okay, right. And go.
All right, so we have that event again. The original concept, one day, one time. It does start to get some traction. We have it at the old Opportunity Hub in downtown Atlanta, right across the street from the Chamber of Commerce, or if you know what the Westin is in Ritz-Carlton, right across the street, directly across the street from that Ritz-Carlton in downtown Atlanta. Same side of the street from the Westin and stuff like that. 200 Peachtree Southern Exchange Ballroom. There's this room upside. Rodney Sampson, and shout out to Rodney for an underrated, part of the Atlanta startup community being more inclusive for people of color is Rodney Sampson. And so if he and his wife don't start that space, people of color in tech don't have a place for us to have events and convene and stuff like that. So they open, and shout out to Earl Coleman, part of that original leadership crew at Opportunity Hub. We have the first event there. It's amazing. Folks like Jessica Johnson and Scholarship Academy. I think Jessica just won a school board slot here in Atlanta, and a few Kashi Siegel and a few other folks, Hosea Feed the Homeless. They were nonprofits that were helped, and it was magical. It was magical. We talk about people staying, about the phrase "stay magnetic," and Justin Dawkins came up with that. It was because it was a magnetic environment there. Like you could feel people helping each other out, and it was the first time that diverse entrepreneurs and diverse developers, software developers in Atlanta had ever come together. Like that was in that for the Atlanta Black tech community. That was like the genesis of community coming together and stuff like that. And it was magical. Like, I mean, we didn't know what we were doing. Again, I had never produced a hackathon before, building the parachute on the way down. But it was created with the belief that our communities have everything that we need to create the change that we seek. We're just not efficient within the ecosystem. Right? Meaning that if we could bring people together and stop redundancy and take the people that are already doing things and making them better, we can create more change faster. And that was the start of that, seeing that in real life.
So a question for you, sort of falling back into the masterclass vibe, the notion of doing something you've never done before. You've never done a hackathon before. You say, you know what, I'm going to do a hackathon now. This is our first one. I'm just going to go and do it. What would you say are some of the most important things for anyone really who's like, I have this idea, I have this desire to do it. I've never done it before. I don't know the logistics. I don't know, what could go, maybe you knew what could go wrong, what could go right, but I just know I have to do it. I'll speak for myself. I'm someone who sometimes I'm like, if I don't know exactly every detail, maybe I should take a class first, then I'll try to do the thing. Like, I'm not always one who's like, I'm just going to do it because I need to do it. So what would you say as someone who has done it? I'm going to make a hackathon happen. What advice would you give to people who just need to go and make something happen today?
Well, one, just be super comfortable with you'll just figure it out. Right. I mean, that whole thing, I mean, I don't have any super insightful advice except for, You know, the whole thing around building the parachute on the way down is real. You just gotta look, but not, you gotta look, but you gotta leap, but not look, right? You can't worry about it. You just gotta jump out there and just don't look down. Just don't look down. Once you, again, it's one of those things, right? Like, if I'm sure most people have never walked a tightrope, like I've never have, but it's one of those things. If you ever been like in a super tall building where they got the glass floors, like super, like hundreds of, feet in the air, it's all good until you look down. And then when I look down, I'm like, oh, so now like I can't take it no more, right? Just don't look down. Just go ahead and just jump. Just jump and then figure out how to build that parachute on the way down. Because once you realize what's happening, you're probably not gonna do it. So just don't look down. Yeah, that's the best thing. Oh, the other thing I would say is, and it sounds like super one-on-one, like super basic, but it's so important. Literally write the idea down or type it up as soon as possible. If you ever think, and I got this idea from Jack Dorsey. I was watching him speak actually in Atlanta at the old platform summit. He's like, his thing was, the longer you wait to literally write an idea down, the least likely it is, or the less likely it is for it to actually happen. If you think back to, like, if you're in the shower and you come up with an idea, or like you're in the bed laying down and then you come up with an idea and you're like, you know what, I'm just going to write it down when I wake up in the morning. What happens? That idea is going for forever. You don't remember it. So again, if you're in the bed and like you come up with the world's greatest idea, you better get up and write that thing down. Because again, it's called trace decay, right? You're just not gonna, you'll start to forget it, but also you're just least likely or less likely to make it happen. So don't look down, and then write the idea or type it up as fast as possible.
Don't look down, write it down. Bam. Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, so we're at the hackathon, and I kind of want you to paint the scene for us a little bit more. You're sort of talking about the energy to people who are in the room, and this is 2014 at this time, 2014. I mean, what were some of the activities that were going on? What was, from what you can remember, like, what was, were there any highlights of the event? Were there any people there who you were like, they were there? Like, what? Just set the scene for us a little bit.
So you said people that were there during that first hackathon?
Yes.
Oh, man. My memory's going on. I remember, so Reggie Harrison was there. Now at SCAD, I believe, hopefully he's still at SCAD. I haven't talked to him in a minute. I mentioned some of the other people like Jessica Johnson, Kashi Siegel. I mean, Justin Dawkins was there, obviously. Man. Terrence Puryear was there. Oh my gosh, I memory's going on. These folks going to kill me.
Almost 10 years, I think,
Nah, sure. I mean, it was, I still see it. I still look at the, I can see some of the photos in my head, but Drew Riley was there. Trends VC. He was on that first team. Oh man, it was magical. It was just magical.
All right. So after the hackathons happened, you did it, you made it happen, your first one. What was sort of the aftermath? And then for you, what was that next, like, okay, now we have to do this? Or how did Goodie start to evolve after the first hackathon?
Yeah. So people were like, that night, they're like, we got to do it again. And I'm like, bet. Now I'm used to doing events. So I could do an event in the next few weeks, and so we were like, let's do it again in 3 months. Now, at the time, again, that's easy for me to produce an event. I didn't realize that people would do like one hackathon a year, much less 1 in 2 months or 3 months, excuse me. So we planned another one for 3 months later, June of 2014. It was even bigger and better than the first one. Google came as a sponsor. Julberg Solomon, she was like, she's gonna sponsor. Be the Match sponsored, so the campaign for bone marrow transplants and stuff. They were a sponsor. I actually signed up on the spot to donate bone marrow. And so, so that was even bigger success than the first one. More people. We were like, yo, we're on to something. we're on to something big. And it was that point we decided to actually form an actual nonprofit organization. Before that, it was simply just a side project that I was personally paying for out of my own pocket, to the tune of thousands of dollars and stuff like that. And so we also got a $1,000 grant from the Awesome Foundation. And so shout out to Ms. Mahaffey there. And I mean, it was just awesome, right? And again, we were like, okay, we got to do more. Second one was bigger. It was still one day. Let's do a weekend a true hackathon over a weekend. And so fast forward to like February of 2015. So Jewel, and she's working with Google, they donated their office and we did a full weekend hackathon at Google, Friday through Sunday, right? 10 more nonprofits, like for real hackathon. And it was so many people, they dubbed it Club Google. Like Jewel was like, how many people are you gonna have at the office? I'm like, 10 nonprofits, our team volunteers, about 80, 90 folks throughout the weekend. Yeah, we had like 300 people up in there. It was crazy. it was crazy over a weekend. And so it was like packed to the gills. And we were like, yo, this thing is big now.
So tell me about some of the logistics around that, growing from, you said it was like a couple teams for the first one to like a 300-person weekend bonanza. Like you have your sort of events hat on. How do you manage that type of growth in that short period of time?
Yeah, it was, I mean, shout out to all the volunteers there, because we were entirely volunteer driven at the time. And it came down to honestly people just doing their job, right? You sign up, you say, I'm going to show up on this day or these days and this time. You just got to focus on your role and trust your teammates are going to do theirs. Right? Because that's the only way that we were super efficient with all those people in those physical places. And we were in a company office and so on and so forth. That's the only way it could work, is everyone had discipline and did their role, did their job for the time being. Right. And everyone did. Shout out to everyone that just simply like, they're like, I want to do this in life. And for this time period, I'm going to, reduce myself for the greater good. And that's the only way it happened. And we were super efficient in planning things out. And then people just, they did their job and it was executed beautifully.
That's another, this scenario is like another parallel for me in like the arts community, right? Where a person will be like, I'm going to rent out this space in the back of a coffee shop to put on my one-man show, and all my friends will come and volunteer to do the costumes and the lights and everything. And I don't know who's going to come to this, but I'm just going to do it. And my question for you, going back to how you said this initial endeavor of putting together this hackathon was something that you were just doing out of your pocket, something that you felt that you had to do. Looking back on the start of Goodie and what Goodie was growing into, would you have done anything differently at the onset in terms of like forming the entity first and then doing activities? Or are you like, no, I had to do the stuff first to know that this was like the MVP for what we could become?
I wouldn't change anything. I think way too many people, especially in the social impact space, get caught up in, oh, we got to make it a nonprofit, then we got to get a 501c3, and then we go like, you know what? Let's just do it tomorrow. We gonna work everything out on the back end. It'll be all right. You know what I'm saying? If people want to give us money, we'll figure it out. Like, and that's the mentality of, being a startup founder. But also the other mentality I had was people are suffering today. Remember, the objective of the hackathons were to help the nonprofits help more people. There are people that that are homeless today, that they're gonna go without food today, they're gonna go without education today, they're gonna go without help around their health today, they're gonna go, their environment is messed up. It's happening today, and the numbers are only gonna get worse as time goes on. So we can choose to like be all super official and structured and bylaws and yada yada yada, and it's take a year to form this nonprofit. Or we can stop people from suffering, or try to stop people from suffering today. So which one you want to do, right? my mentality around doing this work is this. It's not if this stuff matters to you. It's not if education or health or safety or environmental sustainability or something like that matters to you, because it does to most people. The question is, how much does it matter? And what are you willing to do to stop it from happening, right? Do you want to wait for the structure, or do you want to stop it right now? And we have the mentality is we want to stop it right now. We can't, it pains us to think about the people that are suffering today, and whatever we got to do to stop it, we're going to do it.
When did you know that you wanted to make Goodie a nonprofit organization? Because I mean, in theory, this could have been just like a social enterprise, a for-profit organization. When did you sort of make the decision, like, no, this is a nonprofit organization?
Well, from the outset, I mean, after that first hackathon, and we, again, I believed it would blow up. And then after we actually had the first one, I was like, okay, now we're on something. But let's just prove ourselves one more again to make sure. And after that second one, it was like, yeah. Let's go ahead and make it official, right? And then we just, at that time, it was all about nonprofit. Now, there's a whole other part of this story where large companies would pay us to do versions of Goodie Hack privately for them. And that's a whole other thing which happened, and we did a lot of those. That's a social enterprise stuff, but I always wanted to make it a nonprofit, mainly because I thought it was easier to maybe get some donations, but also because I thought it would be easier for us to have longevity, right? And outlive us, quite honestly. You look at organizations that go on for decades and so on and so forth. They're typically like nonprofits. And, we thought that, or in particular, I thought that it would make it easier for Goodie Nation, what eventually turned into Goodie Nation, to be around in the year 2060, right? And hopefully it is.
Very cool. So, okay, we're still in Goodie Hack hackathon era. And so you mentioned that you did different iterations of what Goodie Hack was. One of them being for corporations as a social enterprise. So what other versions of Goodie Hack existed out there? Were there different like levels? Was it like different types of people? How did this program sort of evolve?
So after that, in particular, after that one at Google, but after the second one, but really after the one at Google, that's when it started to get interesting. People were like, okay, yeah, nah, this is it, right? And so a few things are happening. Now we also need to go into the other era of Goodie Nation. And we'll talk about some of the pain points around the nonprofit hackathon model. But we started to go and doing stuff for students, for kids. So we've done versions of hackathons for middle schoolers and stuff like that. And we've done them for people from 5 years old up to like 80 years old that participated. Right. So we would do stuff at schools. We would do stuff local, like high school and middle schools. We would do stuff at colleges. We would the stuff for it's hilarious. The stuff for like college and like middle school, high school, even college was called hack days. So a play on like school days and stuff like that. We did we talk about founders therapy. We did stuff called teacher therapy, because teachers are people too, and they got a lot of frustrations around education and all that. And so we had sessions. We partnered with like Teach for America on those type of things. So we did all kind of stuff.
So okay, so now you formed your entity. You're branching out with what Goodie Hack is. How long was the sort of hackathon era? How many years did that last?
Yeah, so that nonprofit hackathon era lasted really until middle of 2016. So here's the thing. Those first three hackathons were great. The one at Google in February 15 was awesome. And again, we started doing some other things for kids and stuff around like that. But it got to the point to where, and it really crystallized that one at Google to where it wasn't even a nonprofit. It was actually an agency within the city of Atlanta. They were like, you know, if the team continues to build this idea out, we will pay $1 million a year for this solution. I'm like, oh snap. Like and then they were like, you know what? There are several of our, you know, entities like us around the country. I'm sure they'll pay for it too. And I'm like, yo, team, y'all better go build this thing out. I know it's a weekend hackathon. Yo, y'all got to do this. And they were like, yeah, nah, yeah, we good. I mean, no shade on developers. They're a bunch of developers, and they just want to build for fun. And so what we realized was that the hype and everything was high during the weekends, but the reality is nothing was ever completed during the weekend because you just can't complete a full product, right? You got to do work after. And so what was happening is these mainly developers who were building products didn't want to do the work after. And this is a typical issue with most hackathons, right? It just happens just within that very short time period. People go back to their jobs and lives and stuff like that. And I'm like, we can't have this because this is about making the world a better place, around helping people. We need people that can lead a team to complete the product and actually make money off of it, right? Create a revenue model. And so going back to SF35 and the founders in that group and my personal experience, I'm like, that person is an entrepreneur. So let's evolve the model from being a hackathon to help nonprofits to like helping somebody build or come up with an idea for a tech product, typically that would make the world a better place, and use hackathons of volunteer developers and the like to build the product. And then the team, the entrepreneur leads the team, they form a company around it, and then they continue on with the company. Like that's the evolution. And so we expanded it out the next year in 2016 from what was a one-day hackathon, then a weekend hackathon, to a 3-month program that we called Goodie Innovation, right? Basically 3 main parts in a showcase. So the first part was this. We use design thinking and we do a 1-day ideation lab to help entrepreneurs identify a problem and then come up with an idea for a solution in the features. We send them out in the world for a few weeks to get feedback and the whatnot. People may call that customer discovery. And then they would go to the first of 2 hackathons. The first hackathon, people would, typically like volunteer designers would build a prototype, a clickable prototype. Somebody would come up with a logo. Then volunteer graphic designer. Then they would have a volunteer marketer come up with that plan to get the first 100 or so users. Second hackathon was where Goodie, and that hackathon was called Goodie Marketing and Prototyping. Second one was Goodie Hack, where developers would take those prototypes, turn them into an MVP. And then, a little while later, then you had a demo day, right? So that was Goodie, what we call Goodie Innovation, right? 3-month program to go from literally 0 to 1.
So, this, just hearing the story up to now, every program from Goodie Nation seems to evolve from another program or another event or another idea, and it sort of connects in a way that, it makes a lot of logical sense hearing it now. And so with this 3-month program, how were you able to get traction for it? These are people who are excited for the hackathons, and you said that a lot of them didn't want to do further work. What from like a brand outreach strategy, this is another brand new idea that we have. How did you all start getting people involved with this?
Yeah, so we started to come up with themes. We thought it was, and so I thought it was a good idea to come up with themes for the hackathon. I thought it would be easier actually to it was, and this was more so around helping the entrepreneurs with problems. Anyone could. There's a school of thought that, hey, anybody could come in with a problem, it will help them out. But we also got to bring in mentors and coaches and stuff like that. We figured it was easier if everybody worked on the same general category of social impact, that it'll be easier for us to help them out. So 2016 is happening. Kind of the height of gentrification in Atlanta is a big thing. I had witnessed some stuff happening in the neighborhood of a former team member and stuff like that. And we hosted, and this is happening obviously all across the country. And we're like, yo, at the same time, there's about to be a huge, it was already happening, a huge wave of gentrification. And so we hosted at the old General Assembly in Ponce City Market. We hosted a panel on gentrification, right? And so the challenge was going back to how I was challenged at Hive to impact 1 billion people. All of that Goodie Innovation 3-month program had a challenge to it. And so the challenge was around helping people affected by gentrification to either make or save money. And so we had a panel around it. Someone had the dude over the Beltline, had a few other folks from the city. It was packed out. General Assembly, I mean, that room was wall to wall, elbow to elbow. City. At the time, there was a city a mayoral race in the city of Atlanta. Those folks came out. I mean, it was packed to the gills, and that brought up a lot of hype. Actually, a person in that audience was India Hayes of Mini City. So when she started, so she was a part of that first cohort. That first cohort had her. It had Jasmine Crow from Gooder, Jen Graham from Now Inclusive, used to be called Civic Dinners. And so we recognized the problem around gentrification. We hosted a public panel on the topic, and it was super. I mean, it was hot. I mean, we had a protester, and he got yoked up. It was crazy. It was a hot button topic, and then we had open applications, and the rest is history.
So, I mean, you did not necessarily start off thinking, oh, one of the things that, my company, my program is going to tackle is gentrification, I'm assuming. And so with this pre-accelerator, it sounds like we're hitting some hard hitting topics with these startup founders. And so I want to know, as Goodie is continuing to evolve at this point, what gave you the confidence or the purpose of, we're going to tackle gentrification, we're going to work with people in health fields? Like, how did you see that startup founders could plug into these larger social issues?
I mean, we did really look for problems that were super pressing needs, right? I mean, and gentrification was the wave in because Atlanta, interesting enough, Atlanta has people from all over the country that moved to it. People are well versed. They're like, yeah, this is happening back in my hometown. It's happening in my old neighborhood, right? And we just started to do the research, and it was like, yo, this is about to be a whole transfer of wealth. Or I'm sorry, it's already happening. It's only going to continue to get worse. And hey, listen, we got to do something about this, right? And that was simply it. Like, the larger the challenge, it is something when entrepreneurs, startup founders, big challenges, you go after them. And so we identified, big problems. The next year, 2017, was around violence. We call it Hack the Violence, after this whole Stop the Violence, movement of the late 80s with rappers and D Nice and all that whole crew. Because of what was happening, not only with police brutality, but just with murders of people from from their fellow citizens, right? And so we wanted to hack the violence, and so that challenge was coming up with ways to reduce violence by the year. I think it was 2030 or something to that effect, right? And so from that we had that pre-accelerator cohort. We also had one around the school to prison pipeline. Actually, we did a whole, ironically, so we got a grant from the Walton Family Foundation around the school to prison pipeline and coming up with ideas to stop that. But it was a national program, and it was virtual. This is before the pandemic. And so we were running virtual programming before the pandemic, and it served us well when the pandemic hit, because we just knew how to go back to Zoom and make things happen.
So, okay, this is a new evolution. you're plugging into these big issues, these big social problems. You're gaining traction as a brand, as a company. Were you satisfied at this point? Like, yes, we've done it. Or, you know, how were you feeling about where the brand was headed?
I mean, again, lots of excitement, lots of impact. People would come out and see the final products and pitches and stuff like that. And we were bringing community together. That first cohort around gentrification, again, 3 companies that are still around, you know, with Gooder, Inclusive, or Civic Dinners, and then many. They've helped out a lot of people. Now, unfortunately, you know, the next, so the 2017 was around violence prevention. The one in 2018 was around cancer and STIs or STDs. Those are difficult problems to solve in general. Those are also difficult problems to solve at scale. And so again, we're a pre-accelerator. The goal was to help these newly formed startups get to an accelerator like a Techstars, right? Venture capital and things of that nature. And so and this is my fault because I was the one that ultimately selected the themes and approved them and stuff. Those type of themes make it much more difficult to do at scale and to get venture capital funding. And so a lot of those startups were not able to make the progress to continue on, right? And so I began to, again, rethink the model. Now, there's a few things we could have done differently. I should have had a focus on creating small businesses so it not be a traditional pre-accelerator. Like, help people come up with ideas and just build a solid company. Like, no venture capital, bootstrap. Another thing that we did try out during that era was around marketing campaigns, right? So the idea now was not to come up with a tech product. It was to create a marketing campaign to bring awareness to like a problem, right? We should have done more around that because, again, those are things that are easier to spin up and launch via like social media and email and things of that nature. But you know, the goal was to create startups that lasted because that first cohort with Gooder in them, they did well. Excuse me. And so I began to rethink the model, and I wanted to consistently produce results. And again, I should have had the team focus on producing marketing campaigns for some of those themes, or we could have just had, you know what, no theme at all. Anything around social impact, you can join, and then we're good to go. Because that one around gentrification was really economic development, and that's a pretty broad thing. That's actually why all the ideas are so different and increase the likelihood. But yeah, so I thought that, you know what, one thing that we do well is we bring a lot of talented people to entrepreneurs. We do that extremely well. We build community well. We bring out folks that are dope. We just need the entrepreneurs to be at the stage where they're ready for these dope people. And so instead of us being a pre-accelerator, the evolution was a post-accelerator. So let's take companies that are coming out of other accelerators and other programs. Let's take them and help them to be more successful by giving them community and introductions and so on and so forth. One thing, and this brings us to our current era, one of the other insights was that, again, in 2016, we helped that first group. When we moved to 2017, the 2016 group still needed help, but we had to focus on 2017. And when 2017 ended, we had to focus on 2018, but 2016 and 2017 needed help still. And we didn't have the resources to help them out. And so I know the pain of helping like a cohort, and then you got to move on to the next cohort while the previous cohort still needs help. So we're like, you know what? Let's solve for that problem. For all the people that are having, and by this time, a bunch of other programs that sprung up in Atlanta and across the country, let's help out the folks that are doing, you know, the cohorts, and we'll just take their alumni basically and then support them.
I mean, this is such a specific problem, right? Like, let's start starting at like a really high level. If somebody was like, okay, I want to start a program to help entrepreneurs. Okay, I want to help entrepreneurs of color and women and diverse founders. I want to help people in the social space. I want to help people build sustainable businesses. I want to help people build like you found these like niches within niches of problems that founders face. Like, do you know of anyone else who specifically was like, yeah, we need to get these founders ready to get to the next level? But also, even after they go through a program, they still need help. So we have to continue to finesse what they're doing, and we have to do that. Like, this is such a granular approach to helping founders. And I'm just curious about, it sounds like it was just all such a natural, smooth progression. Like, oh, okay, well, yeah, now that we've figured out a hackathon, let's do something to make the projects happen. All right, now that we figured out how the projects happen, let's figure out how to make the project a company. Like, how was this all just this kind of happened or what?
It's two things. One, it's honestly my mindset. It's my mindset, and there's two different ways that it plays out. One, going back to when I was a kid, I grew up playing. I first started playing baseball and then eventually football. Officially in leagues. My dad was a baseball player growing up, and he was, eventually turned into my coach in baseball. But that first year of T-ball, he was just a regular parent, right? He would help out what he could, but he was just a regular parent in the stands. And I remember after that first game. Now, this team, my T-ball team, we won the championship that year, my first year playing. As soon as we walked back to the car and got in, I immediately asked my father, as a 6-year-old, okay, and I think I went like 2 for the 4 at bats I had 2 hits. I'd never asked him about those 2 hits that I had. I was like, what happened on the 2 at bats that I did not get hit? As a 6-year-old, I did this unprompted, right? And I would always do that. That was our thing. After a game, what did you see that I didn't when I didn't do well, right? I never talk about, and this is one of my failures as a leader, I don't talk about what goes well. I talk about what doesn't go well so we can correct it. And so looking at like never being satisfied with the results of the program is my mindset. I always want to get better. Always do a retrospective and consistently trying to figure out ways to produce results to the standard, right? To the standard. And so the other part of this is this mindset and social impact, again, around being efficient. Like, again, we have everything that we need. We're just not efficient. And eventually people will start to come into the community, spin up programs that will be competitive, not only to ours, but to others. And now you have a bunch of programs that are competitive and we're just not efficient. And so I want to be a good ecosystem player. And I'm using the word ecosystem, on purpose. I want to be a good ecosystem player and like not be competitive, right? Because that's not what the ecosystem needs. Ecosystems need to work. It's ecosystems where entities work together for mutual survival. But that wasn't the case. And so, like, you know what? We're here first. You're going to come in and do something not for mutual survival. It actually makes the ecosystem less efficient. We'll just alter a little bit. Let me figure out another problem in the ecosystem that hasn't been solved. In this case, the post accelerator, the alumni problem, and let's do that. So the mindset is just to be a good player in the ecosystem for the greater good of helping out the community, right? At the same time, we're trying to figure out a model that consistently produces the results that we want.
That's so interesting. What this is, and it's this concept I'm obsessed with now, survivorship bias, where we oftentimes only look at the survivors as like the model of that's what I want to be. I want to be the person who survived. But you should also sometimes maybe go out to the field and observe what happened to the people who didn't make it back from the battlefield to say, okay, how can I make sure that I don't end up like that? What happened to them so that they didn't? And so that kind of sounds like a little bit what you were trying to do. You weren't necessarily saying, I want to be the best accelerator and compete with all the other national accelerators. You were looking at saying, what are these accelerators not doing, or what problems aren't being addressed? And how can we ensure that we're not contributing to that problem?
Right. Exactly.
Interesting. Very interesting. So, okay. This is our for those of you just joining, or for those of you who are going to watch the recording later. Before we head on into this fabulous timeline trajectory of the history of Goodie Nation, this is our Giving Tuesday reflections on 10 years of Goodie Nation. We've just heard so many juicy tidbits about how Goodie Nation came to be. I mean, the origin story of the founder, the name, the programs, the people, some of the people involved, some of the activities. It's been a lot of fun. And as we are sort of rounding out our time together, we are now close to the present. We're heading towards the present with the evolution of the post accelerator era. And so we've identified the problem. Okay, it's great that folks are having these great ideas and building these companies, and that's wonderful. But like, how can we actually get them ready to compete, to get funding, to be a sustainable company past, these first or second ideas? And so that's where Goodie Nation is now. So my question is, again, this is like an evolution of a previous program, which seems to be a through line of Goodie Nation. And so you've identified this new problem. You're helping these cohorts of founders. What happens circa like 2020 that
So it's interesting, right? A few things happened. We end the post accelerator, the pre accelerator cohort around cancer, STIs, in summer 2018. Personally, I'm in the process. I just proposed to my now wife, and I've been thinking like, yo, this pre accelerator thing, it ain't it. I got to figure it out. And I know I was getting married in March of the next year, and so I was going to take this time to just kind of figure out this next era of Goodie Nation. So get married, come back from the honeymoon in April. In that first week, I meet with somebody from Cape Port Center out in Oakland. Right, they come to Atlanta. They were having a grant called Tech Done Right, and meet with them. And eventually, long story short, we get the grant. I didn't think that we were going to get $100,000 to launch this post accelerator we called Intentionally Good. And so, it was a multi-organization grant with Collab Capital and Cornelius Bankston and stuff like that. But Goodie Nation was the main, as the only nonprofit, we were the main org on it. Matter of fact, so it was $100,000. Now, up until that point, we had never gotten a check larger than $30,000. And again, to a certain extent, I was funding some of the stuff out of my own pocket still, even though we had a few other sponsors. We weren't getting large for what we were doing. We were not getting large checks. And so I didn't think that we were getting the grant. Matter of fact, I remember calling Justin Dawkins and I'm like, hey man, it's around the time we're going to get notified of the grant. I'm like, I don't think we're going to get it, bro. I was driving down Memorial Drive and he's like, I think we're going to get it. I'm like, I don't think we're going to get it. We never got a grant before, a large grant. I don't think we're going to get it. Like 2 days later, I'm in the barbershop waiting to get a haircut. And I look down at my phone. It's like 4:32. And I look down at my phone. I see the email in the preview says, congratulations, you're selected for Tech Done Right. I was like, holy shit. I literally yelled that out. I was in the bar. People were like, what's this dude doing? I was like, then I walked outside. I called Justin. I was like, dog, we got it. We got it, dog. He's like, yeah, I told you. Sorry for all those people watching in public or whatever. But yeah, we got it. And here's the thing. This is like the middle of June. They're like, this was like June 20th or 21st, something like that. of 2019, they're like, yeah, we're going live basically right after 4th of July with the announcement. Now, again, it was the Intentionally Good was just simply a program on paper. It was a proposal. There was nothing there, nothing there. And they're like, yeah, we're going live in like a week and a half. And by the way, in the first 60 days, starting today, you need to have shown some evidence. And I'm like, oh, snap. And so basically we spun it up super fast, had a small cohort, 11 companies cohort in the fall of 2019. We were preparing for the second pilot cohort in the spring of 2020 when the pandemic happened. Matter of fact, we had gone out to Oakland. I know we're coming up on time here. Early March of 2020, went out to Oakland for Cape Poor Center. They did a workshop for all the grantees. And I was like, dang, can I get back home? Like that, it was that, and a week later, everyone was home. I mean, it was a tough time, right? It was a tough time. I saw many of my colleagues thinking about like laying off their team, shutting down. And I committed to the team at Goodie Nation, like, yo, we ain't going nowhere. But if it comes to that point, I will let you know. I'll give you, you're not going to wake up to an email or a phone call like, yo, you out. I'm giving you 3 months. But privately, I was worried. I'm like, oh my
gosh. Of course, yeah.
Again, all funders pulling back, everyone's pulling back. I'm like, I don't know how we going to do this. And please murder George Floyd, right? Please murder George Floyd. And just like that, switch happened. And then we get opportunities and here we are.
I mean, this is a whole separate podcast episode in a way. The 2020 influx of support for diverse founders, diverse businesses. As we look back at history, there's pros, cons, there are things, we're going to look back on and be like, wow, that was a weird, bizarro time. But for you as a founder who was like determined, like, no, even before anything happened, like, no, we're going to keep this going. I mean, even just some of your like top level reflections as a founder at that time, as a founder whose core mission was to help other founders who also were probably like, what is going on? Like, do you remember any of those kind of conversations you had with yourself about like, what is happening? What are we going to do?
Yeah, I mean, excellent question. It was a lot of it is, this is where leadership comes into play, right? I wanted to make sure on a human level that our team was good. I remember what happened. Like so the way it worked was I was also running the startup program for WeWork in Atlanta, WeWork Labs at the time. And so I was officially out of the role of CEO of Goodie Nation at the time, but there was a team running it, but they were just based out of the same space we were in. And so we were having a event at that WeWork in downtown Atlanta that's since closed with Techstars Atlanta. And WeWork was like, basically we're shut down across the country, maybe probably in the world, but we're going to let you have this event. But as soon as the event is over with, y'all got to go home. And I found this out during the event itself, right? During the workshop. I think the workshop was at 12 and it was over at 1, something like that. And so I remember I had to tell the team, like, yo, you got to go home and stuff. And I remember the look on their face, like total shock. Like, what do we do? And I was thinking, like, on a human level, okay, here's what you do. Go home, get some food, gas up. I'm thinking we probably going to be back in a few weeks. And that's what I actually thought. You know what I'm saying? And then it became apparent that wasn't going to happen. And so the same thing I'm thinking with the founders. Okay, entrepreneurs are thinking like PPP loans and, the mindset is them helping them understand how to navigate this on a human level, how to navigate this on a founder level. At the end of the day, it's about survival, right? That was what was going through my head at the time.
No, that's real. That's real. I mean, yes, again, like that's like a whole separate podcasts in a way, like how you traversed all of the things in the 2020-ish era. But you've done it. Obviously, you are still here. Goodie Nation is still standing and thriving. And so right now, I mean, like how is Goodie Nation structured? What evolutions have even come from that time? What is like your burning problem that you're like, okay, this is what we have to focus on now?
Okay, so now how we're structured is this: the platform, our mission, is closing the relationship gap in the innovation space. Again, it really has always been that. Back when we were trying to help out entrepreneurs get connected in that Facebook group to resources and mentors, it was always the same way with the nonprofits and connecting them with developers and marketers, designers. It's the same way in the pre-accelerator with helping founders get connected to developers, designers, and marketers and stuff like that. So the platform has always remained the same, even though maybe what we did, the programs were different. The platform is the same. And it's built on several pillars, right? One, dope people. Bring dope people into the mix, which has really always been the case. Two, accountability and performance, right? We want to hold people accountable to making progress or to making progress in performance against the goals that they set. And three, community, right? Those are the pillars of Goodie Nation. Now, every year we have a different theme or campaign. This year in 2020, it's one for all for one. 2023, excuse me. In 2024, it's we, our, and us, which is around solidarity and being inclusive and being who you are as a person, kind of based off of De La Soul's me, myself, and I, right? So that's our theme. So we go platform, pillars, and then a campaign or a theme, which is we, our, and us. Then you start to go into initiatives. And our programming initiative is Intentionally Good, which is essentially a culture of paying it forward, of being intentional around helping your fellow community members, mainly founders, but as we're evolving into other people, investors, community builders, strategists, people that work in government, people just in the innovation space in general. Excuse me. And so initiatives are then broken down into programs, right? We have several programs at Goodie Nation. We have our next generation program focusing on pre-seed startups, our seed stage program, in our growth stage for seed stage, those that raise the seed round, or equivalent if they're not tech startups or VC backable startups. And then our growth stage for those at a kind of a Series A or similar level. We also have programs we run in conjunction with other organizations like Google for Startups and their Black Latino Founders Fund, like Lenovo and Evolve Small. We recently announced one with Amex Ventures for future of tech is inclusive, and several others as well. Tech Equity Collective for Google and the Tech Equity Collective Impact Fund. So these are all the various programs that we have here at Goodie Nation. And then we kind of break down programs into objectives and so on and so forth. And so it's been a journey over 10 years, become much more structured. We built internal systems to help things at scale. We have over 600 startups or 600 founders, in our program. I think it's over 630 now, not only across 33 states here in the U.S., but also 15 other countries outside the U.S. So it went from, 10 years ago, helping 10 nonprofits based in Atlanta, Georgia, to now helping over about 550 organizations across the world.
Well, I mean, huge congratulations to you for raising up this idea that has spanned across 10 years and is continuing to evolve. I mean, I guess if you want to do like a pat yourself on the back moment, like what do you feel at this stage? I mean, this is still just like in the weeds in the beginning of the Goodie Nation story, I'm sure. But like, what are you the most proud of at this stage so far?
I think we've made the world a better place, right? I mean, a few things. One, when I say we, I want to recognize the hundreds of people that have volunteered with Goodie Nation over 10 years, that have been a part of our team. It started out, it wasn't until, 3 years ago that people were actually getting paid for the work. But, the majority of our organization's existence, people were volunteering. They put in work. Right? I mentioned earlier about people focusing on what they got to do to produce these amazing experiences with the hackathons. People put in work for free. And so I'm proud that those folks entrusted me in the vision and believed. And, I think the results of the work is they've made the world a better place, both in literally the outcomes of the hackathons and the startups and stuff like that, but also in the community that was built by doing the actual work. I think we've made the world a better place. And there are, I think, a bunch of other examples of our impact that we're not even aware of. So, for example, I was at a dinner 2 weeks ago by Google, private dinner. And the sister comes and sits down next to me. She came in a little bit late. And I feel like I know her from somewhere. And but I couldn't put my finger on it, right? So we're going around, we're having conversation. We're at the end of the table, our little group down there. And she says, Joey, I don't know if you know me or not, but I was a mentor at one of those youth hackathons back in 2016. She's like, my team actually won. And she was like, she had never been to one of those hackathons before, but she wanted to make an impact and help out kids. And so during that youth hackathon for middle schoolers, in one day, we helped them come up with an idea using design thinking and build a prototype for an app. She took that process and then put it into her PhD work. And then she's now a professor at Spelman, by the way. And that influenced some other projects she did for the community. Now, I would have never known that. I hadn't seen her since 2016. I think she may have moved away from Atlanta to complete her PhD or something like that. So I never would have known unless she sat next to me at the dinner. She could have easily sat somewhere else. But unless she sat next to me at the dinner, I never would have known that. I bring that up as an example of the stories of our impact that we will probably never know at Goodie Nation. And I'm just proud that we can actually have that type of impact, right? The stuff that we know that we're super proud of, there's probably even a lot more we'll probably never know about. And I think we make the world a better place.
Yeah, it's that ripple effect. You just have no idea what one experience, what one phone call, email could potentially do. And yes, as y'all can see at the bottom, if you are one of those people who in some way has been impacted by Goodie Nation, if you've been to an event within the past 10 years, if you met someone or someone set up a meeting for you, or you just learned something, even something virtually, if you were part of that original Facebook group, please submit an impact story. We would love to hear from you and potentially feature you on a later Goodie Nation 10-year anniversary special of some sort. And really, we just want to connect and hear from you and see what you're up to as well. Because as you just heard, we don't know what you all could be up to. That's amazing. And it feels good to hear it. So speaking of next year's 10-year anniversary, Joey, what are some of the things that people can expect? What can we look forward to? And how can folks keep up with you and with Goodie and what's going on?
Yeah. So March 1st, 2024 is that 10-year date. And, we're looking forward to a lot. We're probably going to be doing a lot in the month of February. Some of the things will be announced a little bit later on. But for the anniversary itself, there's a few things that we'd like to do. One, we want to bring Goodie Hack back, the original version of Idea Hackathon, and use that as a way for people to come together in person, to come up with ideas, to help us define the next era of Goodie Nation, right? I think we're in a pivotal time in the innovation space. AI is causing a lot of issues and opportunities, right? The economy and the way that it is, maybe even, some of it is impacted by AI, but also the headwinds against DEI. We're in a very pivotal place as we enter into the middle part of this decade. And so again, as we have evolved over the years based on key learnings and observations, I just anticipate now we're going to have to keep on doing that and shift a little bit more, right? We have some ideas about what we should do, but we want to be inclusive and bring the community together in the original way in which we came together. And we want to do a Goodie Hack around the future of Goodie Nation, right? We want to do a private, dinner for some of our funders and stuff like that over the years. And then we want to have a party, right? We want to, going back to my days, we call it party well, do good. Party well, do good. And so, we're planning those things out. And again, Casey, I'll kick it to you for what you'll be doing over the next few months in terms of, you alluded to earlier, telling some of those stories. But we also want to, tell the stories of people who have impacted us and stuff like that over the next few months. So I don't know if you want to go into more about that as well.
Sure thing. Yes. So as we mentioned, we love hearing what you've been up to. We love hearing how Goodie Nation has impacted your journey. If you are like even watching this and like, oh yeah, I forgot I even went to the thing, but that's where I met such and such who ended up being my founder. That's so weird. Like, we love those little tidbits, those little nuances, the things that you may not even realize had an impact on a part of your journey. And so we invite you to submit an impact story. Again, that impact doesn't have to be like, oh yeah, we went to the Goodie Nation event and somebody wrote us $1 million check. It could be, yeah, I met someone who was like really nice and gave me some advice that I used later. So no matter how big or how small an impact, if in some way you have been involved with Goodie Nation, we have the link below, goodienation.org/TEN10. And we would love to hear from you and chat with you. And yes, have your contribution to this 10-year celebration be heard and celebrated with all of us. So yeah.
Awesome. So hopefully that's it. I don't know if you have any more questions. I mean, this has been an amazing experience. We've talked for over 2 hours straight.
Again, and that was just sort of the mostly linear timeline. I feel like there are branches and branches that will be explored throughout this next year as you are reflecting on so much of what's going on and what's happened and where you want to go. So no, this is exciting. This is 10 years. That is like only the beginning. So that must feel really good for you.
Yeah, it is. I'm super excited. And I'm super thankful of the people who sacrificed their time. They've sacrificed money in most cases and contributed to the well-being, the well-being of Goodie Nation. They've bought into the vision, to my vision in particular. Way too many people to name, and I hate naming names because you forget one person and then they they get super upset. But you know who you are, right? You've been super appreciative. Again, my mindset over the years has been, let's focus on problems, right? I don't tend to, acknowledge what's going well, even in personal life or just in general, right? But I do want to acknowledge the people over the years that truly appreciative. We're in a fight, right? We're in a fight to make the world a better place. We at Goodie Nation, we're saying that we're Jedis. We want to bring balance to the force, right? Maybe the first few years, the first 10 years, it was A New Hope. Right. It was the episode 4. I'm a Star Wars fan. I would categorize the time that we're in right now as Empire Strikes Back. Right. Empire Strikes Back. All the things I alluded to earlier, the headwinds against DEI. And so, when the Sith, the bad guys are fighting against us, and best believe while we're out there taking photos at events and posting on Instagram and LinkedIn, they're out there plotting against us. And so my mindset is, let's work hard. Let's commit. Let's work hard. Let's focus, because the bad guys are out there every day plotting against us. Right. And so I'm always trying to get better. Always trying to continue to tweak the model until we can consistently produce the results that we want. And so, again, super appreciative of the people over the past 10 years plus that have helped us, kind of get to this place. And I'm looking forward to the future.
Yes, the evolution continues. That wasn't a Star Wars movie, but it sounds like it could have been sort of, But no, this has been incredible. I hope that you all out in Cyberland have enjoyed this retrospective of 10 years of Goodie Nation's impact. Again, this is just the beginning of a lot of things that are going to be happening for the 10-year anniversary. So make sure you are following us on all the socials, follow us on the website, check in. You're not going to want to miss all the things that we have in store. And Joey, I don't know if you have any closing words.
Yeah, I would say, just as a reminder, this is Giving Tuesday. We are raising money. If the spirit comes over you, I'm not going to say you got to. If the spirit comes over you, please consider donating by texting Goodie 10 to 70 70 70. Not just today, but you can continue to do it really in perpetuity, quite honestly. But you can continue to do this, especially as we're raising money until March 1st for the next era of Goodie Nation. As Casey mentioned, follow us on social at Goodie Nation and across. And we're super appreciative of you, but we really want to hear from you and stuff like that. So let's get it, y'all. Let's continue to build the world, to make the world a better place by being inclusive and building community and really being intentional interaction. So this has been an amazing experience. Shout out to all the folks who've been dropping comments like DeRod Cook and Liberty White and Tony Brown and a few others across the various platforms. And we'll see y'all later. Peace out.